What's up, guys? Tower Gang Toad back again. This is Better Off Dead College Football Week 10. Almost the end of the season. Although I keep saying that, it really is now. I'm only going to have 3 plays this week because there are a lot of teams that are in pretty negative spots, I would say, but it seems like they're all in the Pac-12 pretty much, and they're all playing each other. And maybe I'll run down like a whole bunch of those situations quickly after I give out the plays, depending on how much time I have. College football's been real nice the last 2 weeks, 7-1. Last week, 3-1, with that one loss being pretty close, and it is a team that I will be talking about in one of my plays as well. That was Kentucky, the one loss. They were within the number in the fourth quarter. They were down 2 at one point to Tennessee. I liked the way that set up. I liked all those situations really nicely. I played 4 teams that were coming out of byes that went into the byes on losses, and they were all playing against teams that were in negative spots. So I liked them all. Unfortunately, the Kentucky one did not quite get there. They were within that number right near the end, within 2, and then they wound up losing by 6 in the end, unfortunately. The other ones were all nice, man. NC State as a 10-point dog at home, outright win. That was awesome. Louisville, very easy. Just rolled Duke, shut them out. Easy win. Liked that one. Nice. And then Cal, thought I was going to get the money line cash on that one too. USC, they're playing like a defeated team, man. Like I said, they were basically in like the Dream Crusher scenario, having lost that second game, really kind of just wiped out their playoff hopes, and it appeared that way. They were losing most of that game. Cal looked like they were going to be a double-digit underdog outright win until the very end. I think they were winning by like double digits late in the game, like definitely in the second half. Let that whole thing slip. Wound up becoming a close game. And then I think USC wound up taking the lead by 7 close to the end. Cal tied it, or looked like they had maybe tied it up at the end. They got the final touchdown at the end there. You kick the extra point, you'll tie it and send it into overtime. But I guess the thought was that we don't want to let this go into overtime because USC is the much better team, and we just don't want to take that chance. So we'll take like the 50% chance to win it right now and go for 2, even though I don't know if I agree with that decision on the Cal coaching staff's part, because yeah, USC has, USC is the much better team, but they have a horrific defense. So I think you might be able to defeat them in OT. I don't think USC is going to be able to stop most offenses, really. They certainly didn't stop Cal in that game, as Cal wound up losing 50-49, I believe was the final, because what did they do? They did go for 2, wanted to win the game right there, and they failed to get it and lost by 1. So we got the cover. The cover was pretty much never in doubt. That was like wire to wire, so still nice, but they just they made you think that you had that money line cash almost the whole way, most of the way, and they just had to rip it away from you right at the end. So unfortunately, but I've been on a nice run, like pretty nice hot streak, mostly thanks to the NBA. If you've been following my NBA, I started off with a loss, and then since then I've gone 6-1 in the NBA. It's like I can't even lose, man. Like I almost gave out more leans in the morning video today in the NBA, but I just didn't really have time, and I had to like I had to look over the. I had to break it down and look over the schedule a little bit more in detail, but I didn't make any other plays, but the games that I leaned to, it seemed like every single one of them I was right about in the NBA. It's just crazy. But I won on the Cleveland Cavs, a nice outright win. Good thing they hit on the money line, so I wound up having a 1-1 day. But because of that money line cash, I still won. So thanks to the Cleveland Cavaliers, man. This NBA going real well so far, real nice. A slight win despite going 1-1, which would typically be a loss when you're paying the -110 VIG. But, yeah, the St. Louis Blues did not get there. I was looking okay, even though they were down 2-0. They cut it to 2-1 late in the second period, and they had a power play. And they had some chances there, but the power play was interrupted because it overlapped the second and third periods. But even so, you just cut it to 2-1. You got the power play. You got the momentum. I think that break going into the third period halted their momentum, and unfortunately, they wound up losing 4-1. But I think the game was closer than that score would indicate there, I would say. If you look at the statistics, I think St. Louis won in the face-off percentage. They won more of the face-offs. The shot total was fairly close. What can you do, man? We move on. Let's talk about college football this week. Let's talk about it. That's why we're here. First game out of the three, only three this week that I'm going to be looking at. I think this is a nice play. I'm going against a team that's in a sandwich spot. I like these meaty sandwiches, man. And this is a nice southern, I don't know what you want to call it, a pulled pork sandwich, because the hogs are going to be the meat of the sandwich. The Arkansas Razorbacks +6. That's what I'm going to be doing here in this one. This is another one of those plays, man, where it might be like tough to stomach. You're looking at this like, why would you want to play the Arkansas Razorbacks, man? They're a horrifically ugly team. They're 2-6, haven't won any SEC games this year. Why would you want to be doing this, man, against a good Florida team? And this Florida team is still looking to become bowl eligible. Well, we'll talk about all that briefly. Looking at the market here, first of all, though, Florida, it looks like they've ticked up from 5.5 to 6 as the home favorite, but 60% of the tickets on them, but 67% of the cash on Arkansas. So that even though the line looks like it's ticked up a little bit, the cash discrepancy does look like it's on the side of Arkansas, and I think I can tell you why that is the case. I agree with it, so I think the market might be in agreement with me on the Arkansas side here. And like I said, it almost looks too easy to lay under a touchdown with Florida. It's like Florida's got to be the much better team, right? They're above 500 in conference. They're an above 500 team. They're trying to get their 6th win to at least become bowl eligible here. Arkansas is essentially dead. They pretty much don't have hopes to become bowl eligible because they'd have to win out at this point. They haven't won a single game in the SEC. They're 2-6. Why would anybody want anything to do with Arkansas, and especially when it's a line that's below a touchdown? But again, when it looks too easy, which I think it does look too easy to take Florida here, it usually is. And I think the bowl eligibility thing here, the bowl eligibility scenario for Florida here, I think that doesn't matter as much when you're a Florida team, when you had higher aspirations than that, because yeah, as I'm going to talk about here in the sandwich spot here that they have a brutal schedule upcoming, and this is really their only winnable game left, so it is possible that they lose out all the rest of the games and actually don't become bowl eligible, although I'll explain why I think that matters a little bit less than teams in some other situations, and I think it's twofold. One is that Florida's a team that always has higher aspirations than just making a bowl. Like, they're a big name team. They're in the SEC. They expect to be like a ranked team. They expect to be in one of the bigger bowls. I'd say that probably like a reasonable ask for them, like reasonable aspirations for them to have coming into the season, if not even to get to the playoffs, even though those days have passed. We're no longer in the Tim Tebow, Urban Meyer days. But even so, I think maybe like reasonable aspirations for them to start the season would be to get into like one of the big bowls, like the New Year's Six bowls or something like that, get like a nice reward for the season. And so those aspirations, I think, are not going to happen now. So I think, in a way, that might be a little bit of a dream crusher type of thing going on for Florida here. So I think the bowl eligibility, the fact that they need that one win to get that, I think matters a little bit less. But also, Florida's the type of team where I think that even if they wind up 5-7 on the season, which might wind up being the case here, I think they would be 5-7, right? Yeah, if they lose all 4 of these, yes. They are such a big name that I think usually what you see is you have, if there are bowl spots still available, 5-7 teams, if they're like huge names like this and they're big money-making teams, they can apply to play in a bowl anyway, even though they didn't make that 6-win criteria. You've seen teams do that over the years. And Florida might be eligible for something like that if they were able to do that. Because, of course, it is all about money when it comes down to it. And Florida puts asses in the seats because they are still a big-name team with a big fan base. But all that aside, the situation for Florida is just not good. So like I said, I think that third loss that they just had is kind of a dream crusher in a way, because now it's like, yeah, we pretty much, even if we run the table here with 3 losses here, like, we really don't have a chance to vie for an SEC title or anything like that. So we're pretty much out of it. Like the best we can really hope for is getting into a bowl, and just getting into some like shitty bowl as a 6-6 team is really kind of a disappointment. That would be a disappointing season for Florida. So any way you slice it, I think you're looking at a disappointed team at this point. Now the season is now a disappointment, and it's mostly because of what they just what they are coming off of, what they just did, which is they played that huge rivalry game against Georgia, and they got a bit they got pounded pretty much. They lost by 23, as you can see here, which I thought the game would be a bit closer than that. Not like a total blowout, not like a total embarrassing loss, so it's more of a tough loss on the tough side, I would say, and that really makes you like put that season into perspective. Could be a little bit of a dream crusher thing going on. It's a big game to have to come off of, a big loss, and now you have to play a lowly Arkansas team, and coming up after that you have LSU, who's, even though they're ranked 14, they're a really good team. They have one of the best offenses in the country, at least. You have them, then Missouri, and then Florida State. So huge games all around this game, all surrounding this game. This game is surely a sandwich. Nice pulled pork sandwich here. Slathered in barbecue sauce, man. That's what I like to see. And on the other side, Arkansas, they've lost 6 games in a row. Nobody's going to want anything to do with them. But if they have any reason to get up for any game, I think it's going to be a game like this, where if you look at the situation that they have going on here, even though, of course, they could technically still win out and actually become bowl eligible, and that doesn't seem completely unreasonable since some of these games are at least winnable. So maybe that's a possibility, but that's probably not in their mind. But I think if they're going to be focused for a game, it's going to be in this situation because they're coming out of a bye. So they have extra time off. And going into that bye, they were on a 6-game losing streak. And some of those can be excused. Like this was a gauntlet to have to go through. They lost to BYU, which BYU isn't that great this year. So that's not great. But maybe they were looking ahead to LSU. They played LSU really tough. So that's very respectable, only losing by 3 there. And then coming off that, they had Texas A&M, and that was a sandwich spot, really, between LSU and Ole Miss and Alabama. That was kind of a down spot there, so you can kind of explain why Arkansas didn't have the best game in that game against A&M, even though I think A&M was a road favorite in that one. Arkansas still didn't play that horribly, losing by 12. Then they stepped it up again. Both of these games are on the road, and they played close games at Ole Miss and at Alabama. So Arkansas, they haven't been playing that poorly. Like they've been in most of these games, so their record is a little bit misleading as far as how competitive they've been. So they've played competitively in these games. And then the Mississippi State game, which I was on Mississippi State in that one because I thought that was a sandwich for Arkansas in a way where they were coming off that close, tough loss against Alabama. That's a tough loss to come off of. And they had this bigger game against Florida up next. Going into the bye on that very sour note like that and having not won since early in September, which is just crazy. Almost 2 months without a win. If anything's going to help you try to turn something around, it's going to be having that bye week, getting that extra week off, getting that extra time to prepare, getting that extra rest, and having a big name opponent up next here in Florida, which is what they have. So both sides of this situation put me on Arkansas. I think Arkansas is in a much better spot, a good spot to try to turn this around and try to finally get at least a win in the SEC. Florida's in a bad spot. Like I said, they're in a sandwich spot. I don't know if there's that much else to say here, but that's what I'm looking at here with Arkansas, Florida. Arkansas +6 is going to be the play, man. Up next, we got a game that I was looking at almost right away after the results of last week, and that is going to be. Oh, sorry, I don't even think I was sharing my screen. That's my bad. Oh shit, my bad. I'll just show you real quickly. Well, hopefully you heard at least heard what I was saying about Arkansas, Florida. But you can see the breakdown there, the cash and ticket discrepancy there. My bad. Sorry about that. Anyway, next game up, is going to be Kansas against Iowa State. And this is a game that I was looking at like right away when you could see the results coming in last week. I was looking to go against Kansas because of what they did last week. And what did they do last week? They had a huge win, man, against Oklahoma. This is a big time game, big win, back and forth game the whole way pretty much. And Kansas wound up winning dramatically right at the end after OU had taken the lead back again. The game was flip-flopping all over the place. Kansas, huge win, very dramatic win. They were 7.5-point dogs as well in that one. And now they come off that, and now they have to face an Iowa State team. And I don't think Kansas is in a sandwich or anything like that, but I think they're just in a massive letdown spot now. And they have to face an Iowa State team. And what you see here is also Kansas. That was their 6th win, so that made them bowl eligible. Although, of course, Kansas, they've been ranked like pretty much all season. So I think they have higher aspirations than just becoming bowl eligible. But that game did give them the bowl eligibility, so maybe that like adds a little bit to like the letdown scenario here. But I think mostly what we're talking about here is a letdown scenario because they're coming off such a dramatic, huge win over Oklahoma. And Iowa State, you have them, they're kind of on a roll right now, but they're not coming off of anything big, really. They just beat Baylor, and you might say, well, in years past, that might be a big win because Baylor is kind of a big-name team, but not this year's. Baylor's bad. They're below 500, and Iowa State's won 3 in a row. And sometimes I might want to look to go against a team that's kind of rolling like this, thinking that there isn't going to be value on them. But when they're beating teams that just aren't really that good, TCU, the best of those 3, and then Cincinnati and Baylor, people aren't going to be really paying that much attention to what's going on with Iowa State here. They're not going to put that much stock into those games like this. But now I think Iowa State is definitely going to be focused when they have Kansas coming into their house. Kansas is ranked. Iowa State is the team that's still looking to become bowl eligible. And I think maybe you could argue that their aspirations this season weren't really that high. So, like, bowl eligibility is kind of what they're mostly shooting for here because they weren't really expected to do that much, even though sometimes they are a bigger name team than they are this year, I suppose. But Kansas got that 6th win already. Iowa State's still looking for theirs. They're trying to do it. They're at home. And if we look at what's going on with the market here, Iowa State's got 86% of the cash, but 57% of the tickets. So it does look like there is more of the money than the tickets are on Iowa State. So it looks like the market might be agreeing with me on this. It looks like it's ticked up from -2.5, only juiced at -104, up to -2.5, -115. So maybe teetering on 3. I laid the 2.5 with Iowa State. I think that's basically the whole rundown of that game. Kansas, really, it's just that Kansas is coming off that huge game. Kansas is in a massive, massive letdown scenario. I like Iowa State. That's bet number 2, play number 2. And finally, the third of the 3. We're getting into a Saturday evening with these 2 games here. Mississippi State +4. And what's going on with Mississippi State? Why do I like this? We can look at the market here, although it looks like the market is slightly disagreeing with me in ways on this. As Kentucky looks like they've gone up from -2.5 to -3.5 through the 3.5, because I actually found a 4 and took the 4, so that's where they're at now as a road favorite. And it looks like they have 98% of the cash, but only 91% of the tickets. I'm not sure I totally buy that. And either way, I do buy that Kentucky is the more public team here because, of course, they are. They have the better record. They've looked better. Everybody knows they're the better team. The books are even telling you they're the better team as they're the road favorite here. But I might expect that some of this money might start coming back the other way, especially since it's gone through the 3.5 now, which is a key number. You might see some of the money coming in on Mississippi State. And also, if people are seeing what I see in this game, so Kentucky, yeah, I mean, they're another team that's sitting at 5 wins here. So, yeah, they're looking for one more win to become bowl eligible, and they don't have too many other shots at that with a couple of ranked teams still left on their slate. But maybe they had higher aspirations than that, too, because they were ranked all throughout this early part of the season. When they started off really hot and then beat Florida very handily, they were still ranked up until Georgia sent them crashing down to earth. So, arguably they had higher aspirations, maybe to get into, like, not just a bowl, but, like, one of the more decent bowls, one of the bowls that's, like, closer to, like, a New Year's bowl, maybe something on New Year's Eve or something like that. I don't know, but regardless of that, I think this is just a really difficult spot for them, a sandwich spot. And you look at the slate of games they have here. This is like the down spot that they have in the last like 5 weeks, pretty much. They beat, or well, they had a bye mixed in there too, I think. But they beat Florida, who was ranked at the time, and still they're like a big name team, and they beat them by a lot. That's a big win there. Then they face Georgia, which is a big game because they're the number one ranked team, of course. They got sent crashing down to earth, as I keep saying, which is kind of a devastating loss in a way, which hung them over. It carried over into that Missouri game because Missouri themselves weren't in a good spot in that game, which I keep having to bring up, even though I don't want to. Missouri was coming off that game where they probably should have beaten LSU, and they wound up not even covering because they threw a pick six at the end to fail to even cover as like a 6 or 7 point dog, which cost me my bet on that, which I hated that. I did not love that at all. But for Kentucky, that was a rough spot. That was kind of a sandwich spot in a way, even though Missouri is also a good team, and they've been in and out of the rankings all year. Then Kentucky had Tennessee after that, which was last week, which I thought was a better spot because Kentucky was coming out of a bye, at least for that one. So they had 2 weeks to prepare for Tennessee, and Tennessee was coming off that Alabama game, I believe, which is a much bigger game. But it was close, but Kentucky couldn't quite get there and didn't quite cover that. They still played a tough game. That was another tough game. So now coming off Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, all those big games. Now they have to go on the road to face a Mississippi State team who's just a team that is probably going to be pretty easy to overlook, kind of like Arkansas overlooked them when I had them a couple weeks ago. And who does Kentucky have up next? Alabama, which they're always, of course, one of the biggest names in college football. That's a huge game. This is like the down spot that Kentucky has in their schedule right now. It's a bad spot. It's a sandwich spot for Kentucky, another southern barbecue sandwich there. I'm on 2 of those, if you want to call it that. And what's Mississippi State? What does their schedule look like? They're kind of in a bounce back spot, at least you might be able to say, because after they pulled off that nice upset win at Arkansas, they had a second straight game on the road and lost at Auburn, which Auburn, even though they're down a little bit this year, that's a tough game, a tough loss to come off of there. So they lost that by 2 touchdowns. That was a second straight road game too. Now they might be in a nice bounce back scenario here, and they're coming off that kind of ugly loss, and now they get to face Kentucky, who's off a bigger game, facing Tennessee, which is also a rivalry game. And talking about bowl eligibility, Mississippi State is still they still might have those aspirations as they're sitting at 4-4. They can go 2-2 in their final 4 games, which some of those are winnable games, as you can see here. So they definitely have shots at becoming bowl eligible here. They're getting points at home, man. I like it. I like Mississippi State. So that is play number 3 there. So just to recap those real quickly. Arkansas +6, Iowa State -2.5, and Mississippi State +4 are the 3 plays. We got Florida in a massive sandwich, in my opinion, against Arkansas. Kansas is in a letdown spot, pretty big time against Iowa State. And like I just said, Kentucky is in a sandwich spot against Mississippi State. So those are the 3 plays. I like those. And if we look at the things I like to do, I mean, just now that I'm actually sharing my screen, sorry, I am just an idiot. I'm just totally out of it. I always do these late night. I apologize. But just kind of an overview of what I like to do. I like to look at last week's games, like last week's results, and see like what teams like might be in like bad spots this week. Wisconsin had this big game against Ohio State. They came within 14, so what do we got going on? Well, they're at Indiana, who's a much lesser team. It looks like the line's gone down from 9.5 to 9, with 87% of the cash, but only 52% of the tickets on Indiana. So Wisconsin might be like hung over a bit from having a big game at home against Ohio State and kind of hanging around there and covering at least the 14.5. So the better of the numbers that were out there. Coming off that big game, they have to face kind of a lowly Indiana team laying almost double digits on the road. Yeah, so that would give me a lean. I would be looking to go against Wisconsin there. So at least that's a slight lean, I would say, at least to Indiana. But then I was looking at Stanford played this tough game against Washington. So you might want to look to go against Stanford because they only lost by 9 or whatever it was against Washington. So that's a big step-up game against Washington. They played pretty well against Washington there. They're going to Washington State, and they have Oregon State next. So maybe that's even kind of sandwichy, but can like a lowly Stanford team that only has one win in the Pac-12, can they really overlook anybody and be in a sandwich? Well, probably not. Probably they won't really overlook anybody. So that's kind of what keeps me off of this one. Even though Washington State might kind of be in a decent spot to like turn it around and bounce back a little bit, I think the market is kind of going against that on Washington State. Looks like they are, even though it's gone up from 13 to 13.5. It looks like 54% of the cash is actually on Stanford, even though 88% of the tickets are on Washington State. So the market read doesn't look like it's going against Stanford, where kind of I think the situation kind of goes against Stanford a bit. I think Stanford, I would not want to be on Stanford in this game at all. I would not want to be even taking those amount of points. Wouldn't want to do it with the way that they're coming off that tough fought game against Washington. So those would be my thoughts there. Then you got so many of these games, man. So many of these games are big. We'll talk about it quickly, I guess, because I just talked about Washington. Washington is in one of the biggest games of the week against USC, and I think Washington is probably in the better spot, but both of these teams are coming off unimpressive games, probably because they were both in kind of look-ahead spots to this game. Washington, like I said, weren't very impressive against Stanford, but probably they were looking ahead to this game against USC, but now this is a second straight game on the road. But even so, I think they weren't totally focused for Stanford, so they probably will be a lot more focused for USC here. USC, of course, as I said, they've been dream crushed, and they were in that scenario last week, USC, where they still wound up coming out with that win. Where, unfortunately, like I said, Cal almost hit the money line for us, but went for 2 at the end and didn't quite do it after they'd blown a lead. They wound up going for 2 and not getting it and losing by 1 instead of winning by 1. USC was in like a major sandwich in that one, so that was a great spot to go against USC. But USC, like I said, they had been dream crushed coming into that game with the 2 losses. Even though they could theoretically still, I think, win the Pac-12, they'd have to probably beat both Washington and Oregon, which is a tough ask. But if they do that, if they get into the Pac-12 title game and they were somehow able to win it, I still think they're still going to be a 2-loss team, and likely Washington would be like a 1-loss team at that point. And you still have to contend with Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, and Georgia, who I think all 4 of those teams are still undefeated, as well as Washington being undefeated, and USC is sitting at being ranked 20 right now. So I really don't see a way that USC would be able to make the playoffs. That's not going to happen. But now that they're kind of they're a week kind of removed from having their dream crush in that Utah game, they might be able to maybe focus a little bit more on football here. And they kind of had the uglier loss last week, the closer call there against Cal. So I don't know. Their defense is just such a nightmare, though. It's like, who do you like in this one? I don't know. This is tough. It looks like Washington is sitting at -3. It looks like it's gone down a little bit, actually, to -3, only juiced at -105. But it looks like Washington has 73% of the cash and 71% of the tickets. So those are kind of conflicting with each other, where it looks like the line's gone down a little bit on Washington, but then it looks like they have more of the cash than the tickets. I don't know. I don't even know which way I would lean in this one, really. But I'm talking about it because it is one of the biggest games on the slate. USC is probably, obviously Washington's the more public team. They're the undefeated team, the team with the better record, and laying a field goal almost looks kind of easy. And people love Washington's offense, of course, even more than USC's offense. So maybe it looks a little too easy to almost take them to just win the game. And USC's, like I said, off of the worst looking of the 2 wins. I don't know if I just accidentally called them losses, but the worst looking of the ugly wins that both teams had last week. And USC's might have been more of like a wake-up call, where now they might bounce back a little bit and maybe be focused a little bit more on this game. So maybe I would slightly lean to USC in that one, getting the points at home, but not by much. Sticking in the Pac-12, I guess, just for a little bit. Oregon blew out Utah last week, where I said that I liked Oregon to do that, and in that game was Utah was coming off their big win against USC and having to play a second big game in a row. And now you look at this slate, this looks like a sandwich spot for Oregon, and it is. It's not a good spot at all, as they just went into Utah and just hammered them. Big win. Now they have kind of a down spot against Cal, and then up next they have USC. So that does look like a sandwich spot, and I probably would indeed lean to Cal in that game, but I would really not want to be on Cal because of what we just talked about. What are they coming off of? This is kind of a brutal stretch here. 4 straight games against ranked teams, and they're coming off almost upsetting USC and having that game kind of in sight there. They were winning by double digits late in the game, lost the whole thing, wound up falling behind, and then getting that final touchdown again in the game, and then going for 2 to try to win the game. The win was like in their grasp, man. Would have been a huge upset, huge win for Cal, and they fell like just short of it. So coming off that, I really would not want to be on Cal, even though Oregon's coming off that monster win in a huge sandwich spot. Both of these teams are in bad spots here, I would say, so that's why I don't like it in either direction there. But if we look at it, Oregon, they're a huge 24-point favorite. Looks like it's gone up from 23 to 24.5, actually, with 91% of the cash, but only 68% of the tickets on Oregon. So it looks like there is some money driving Oregon up there. I wouldn't want to be on Cal after such a dramatic near win, like a near miss, basically, against USC. Wouldn't want to be on Oregon either in that sandwich spot. So those are my feelings there. Oklahoma's in a big game against Oklahoma State, who's now ranked. I don't know how I feel about this one at all. Oklahoma just suffered their first loss to Kansas, so lost their undefeatedness. And maybe you could argue that when that happens, you might be in a situation where you're hung over a little bit and you might lose that game twice. But it's Oklahoma against Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma, I think, is looking to move out of the Big 12 to the SEC. This is a massive rivalry game, and it might be the last one of them. It's unlikely that Oklahoma's just not going to be focused against like their major rival, and when it might be like the last time this game gets played as Bedlam, the big Bedlam rivalry game. Oklahoma State's kind of moved up from out of nowhere into the rankings, but they've faced somewhat easier games here. They're coming off beating West Virginia, Cincinnati, kind of whatever, basically. So they kind of have the better, more immediate situation, I would say. But people also might look and see, hey, Oklahoma State beat Kansas, and they might do that like syllogistic thing where it's like, well, they beat Kansas, and Kansas beat Oklahoma, so that means Oklahoma State should be able to maybe beat Oklahoma, but of course come within 6 points because Oklahoma is a 6-point favorite now on the road. Or maybe this is a neutral site game because it's Bedlam. I forget if it's neutral or not. But I think that syllogistic type of thinking doesn't apply. You got to look at like the individual situation. Oklahoma's up from -5.5 to -6. Looks like 73% of the cash, though, is on Oklahoma State and 62% of the tickets on Oklahoma State. I don't know. It's tough to even have a lean on this, really. I think Oklahoma's kind of in the tougher spot. But then people might, because they're up against a situation where they are facing their first loss, tough game against Kansas. They might lose that game twice, but people might think Oklahoma State is getting some value, or has some value taking the points at home, and especially because they beat Kansas, who just beat Oklahoma. So people might be looking at it that way, like I said. So that might actually mean that there is some value on the Oklahoma side. So I don't know. It's that one is kind of a tough game to read there. So I don't know what to think about that one. Really, I'm mentioning it because it's one of the bigger games on the slate here. What else we got? Georgia is facing Missouri. Georgia's, of course, off that huge win in the cocktail party rivalry game against Florida, the white trash cocktail party. That's a big win for Georgia because that game's always a rivalry game. Georgia in this situation has gone down from -16.5 to -15.5 at home with 54% of the tickets on them, but 65% of the cash on Missouri. I don't even know what Missouri's coming off of. Missouri, I think, might actually be coming out of a bye. So, kind of a tough spot for Georgia, I guess I would say, because they're coming off a big win. But I don't think they're going to necessarily overlook Missouri, because Georgia still wants to maintain their undefeated season, and they know Missouri's good. They know Missouri's a ranked team. So that's kind of what would keep me off of it. But I think I would only lean to Missouri in that one because Georgia's coming off the big win there. And I think it looks like Missouri did have a bye last week. I forget if that is the case. But I would have that somewhat of a lean to Missouri there, and yes, that is the case. Missouri but they went into a bye on a win, on a 2-game win streak. But the last win was against South Carolina, which you can't put that much stock into that. But still, I don't think a bye is going to be that much of a momentum stopper when you know you have Georgia coming up and you're going to have an extra week to prepare for that. So Georgia, having played that huge game and getting that huge win last week against Florida, and Missouri having the bye, I think I would only lean to Missouri in that one. You got K-State is at Texas, another big game here. It looks like Texas has gone down from -4.5 to -4 at home, but it looks like they have 67% of the cash, even though 53% of the tickets are on Kansas State. Interesting situation here because Texas, their starting quarterback had gotten injured prior to the last game, so their backup quarterback played. But that was in a game against BYU, who was not very good this year. But they won with their backup quarterback in blowout fashion over BYU. So he looked good in that game, but I don't know how much stock you can put into that when it's against a bad opponent in BYU. And you might say that was like the injured player theory also kind of in play for Texas there, although I don't know how much value you could have really gotten on Texas when they're the much better team, much more public team anyway, playing a bad team or a team that's like down this year like BYU. I don't know about that. But now now that Texas is in that second game with their backup quarterback there, I don't know how much I don't know if like they're going to regress a little bit after that, because now the injured player theory kind of goes away a little bit. But because now you know that you can win with that guy, so now you tend to like maybe take your foot off the gas a little bit. But it's a big opponent in Kansas State coming in, big Big 12 matchup, so you're still going to be focused on Kansas State. And because it is Texas's backup quarterback, you're getting some value in this. Well, maybe not value necessarily, but you're getting a lower number for sure in the 4s, where I think it would have been probably in the touchdown range if their starting quarterback was actually playing. So a lot of factors going on here. Tough to read. It does look like the cash percentage discrepancy at least is on the Texas side here, but the situation might lead me to look otherwise there. I don't know. In Kansas State, they're coming off a blowout shutout of Houston, but as I talked about, I liked Kansas State in that one a bit because Houston was coming off playing Texas, and they played Texas tough. They had a lead against Texas in the second half and wound up only losing that game by 7. They played Texas tough. That was a big game for Houston, a step-up game, playing their like in-state big brother there. And I think that was Texas's quarterback got injured in that game. So a lot of stuff kind of going on in that game. But Houston stepped up for that game and then had that like major regression and like kind of hangover, like letdown against Kansas State. But then people might people might do the syllogism again here and say, well, Kansas State just absolutely drilled Houston, who played Texas close and almost beat Houston. So there's got to be Kansas State did so much better against Houston. There's got to be value taking Kansas State here with getting points, right? But again, like that syllogism, I tend to like think that syllogism might factor into like the line somewhat, and I tend to like go against that a little bit because I think it kind of skews the perception of the teams a little bit. And again, every one of these is an individual situation. There was a reason why Houston was really not in a good spot, like I mentioned, against Kansas State, because they were coming off that huge game against Texas that they played well in and were almost able to win. So that's what's going on there. So that factor would kind of put me on Texas there, as well as like looking at the market. So kind of the market and everything kind of like makes me like Texas a little bit there. Maybe it makes you like them a little bit more than Kansas State there, but that's just really, again, it's like a really tough read there. And the fact that it's now Texas' second game with their backup quarterback makes me, after they won easily in the first game with them, makes me kind of hesitant to want to do anything with Texas there. And then what else we got here? A couple of the other games I'll go over maybe. Yeah, we got a couple more. Sticking to the Pac-12 real quick, I guess just to get it out of the way here. We did have Colorado played against UCLA. And actually, this is going to play into this Arizona game more. So Arizona, I was looking to go against them. So this is what I want to actually talk about, the Arizona-UCLA game, because I think both of these teams are not in great spots, unfortunately, because Arizona certainly, I would say they're not in a good spot at all here. They just had another good win. Arizona, this has been crazy what they've done, really. They've had this gauntlet of games. Now they're facing their 5th-ranked team in a row. Crazy scheduling. They played Washington within 7. Then they went on the road and hung with USC and were almost able to beat USC and lost that game like pretty much at the end. I think that game was a multiple overtime game, if I remember correctly, which is why I then went against Arizona in the next game, because I thought you have that huge step-up game against USC, huge game, and you lose it like that in overtime. Like, how do you bounce back that quickly? They did, and then some. And they, on the road for the second straight week, they just woodshedded Washington State 44-6, just absolutely crazy. And then after that blowout win, they come and they show up again against another ranked team, and they win at home, I believe, as an underdog against a pretty good Oregon State team, a ranked Oregon State team. Just that slew of games, that gauntlet of games. How do you come off all those games and do anything? And now they face UCLA, but again, they might not be totally unfocused against a UCLA team who's one of the big names in the conference and who is a good opponent as well. You might still be a little bit focused on UCLA. But Arizona, I think they are in the worse spot than UCLA is. They're coming off, just like I said, that gauntlet of games and coming off another like big upset win. UCLA is coming off, I don't know if you would say it's a big game if you think that Colorado is still like riding that hype from the beginning of the season. They're not ranked anymore or anything, but really what happened in that game is that UCLA was somewhere around a 15-point favorite, maybe more, and they wound up not covering, and the game was a bit closer than they probably wanted it to be. They came out with the win, but only by 12. So I don't know if you would consider that to be like a big game, or if you would consider that to be kind of a game where UCLA might get like shocked back into focus a little bit because it was a game they're supposed to win by more than that. I don't know. That's why I'm staying off of this, because I think it's tough to read here, and I don't love like laying points on the road necessarily either, and that's what you'd have to do with UCLA here. But they don't really have a big game up next, because they're facing Arizona State up next. So you could argue, yeah, I mean, Arizona is certainly in the worst spot because they've come off 4 straight, like just big games against ranked team after ranked team with no let up, really. Although I think they had a bye mixed in there somewhere as well, but really that's just tough. So I think the lean would still be against Arizona here slightly, but just those negatives, somewhat, those slight negatives that I mentioned just kind of keep me off of it a little bit as far as UCLA is concerned. But UCLA looks like they have gone up from -2 to -3. And Arizona has 60% of the tickets and 50% of the cash. So somehow it looks like Arizona's got some of the public action on them. But it looks like there's reverse line movement and the more respected money on UCLA a bit there. And I think it's because Arizona's in such a bad spot. But it's surprising to me that Arizona carries that weight now, just because people have seen them play well against all these good teams in a row. So that's kind of crazy to me, really, to see that. That the public is more on Arizona than on UCLA. UCLA, of course, being pretty much the bigger name school, just kind of in general. So that's a bit wild. And to kind of close it out here, I guess I'll mention 2 more games here. Oh, actually, I will mention, even though I said I like Indiana a little bit against Wisconsin, because Wisconsin's coming off that huge game against Ohio State. Indiana's not coming off of an easy game themselves. They played Penn State to within 9 there, and I think that was definitely a cover, because That was actually, yeah, I forgot to even look at this. Penn State was like a 30-something point favorite in that game, I think, and really kind of didn't even show up. I think because Penn State was coming off the Ohio State game where they lost, and I think that kind of handed Penn State like a reality check there a bit. And sometimes when you have that reality check game, like I mentioned earlier, you tend to be hung over a bit, and you can kind of lose that game twice, for lack of a better term. So I think that's what happened with Penn State there. So actually, Indiana, they played Penn State close. They lost by 9 in a game where they were 30-something point dogs. So that's actually pretty big game for Indiana, too. So they could be in a little bit of a hangover spot as well. So even though I would still lean Indiana a bit against Wisconsin, taking those points, I think, as a home underdog. But even so, that's one thing that would keep me off of Indiana. I don't really want to play Indiana if they're coming off that game against Penn State. And kind of similarly with the rest, the couple other games I'll mention, like real briefly here. How am I doing for time here? It's going long. It's up to 45 minutes, and the majority of this is going to be me talking about the games that aren't even my plays. Georgia Tech is another team that I look to go against because they're coming off another big upset win. They upset North Carolina. Crazy that they were able to do that. This was another game that was like, I think it was kind of a back and forth game, and Georgia Tech fell behind by multiple scores going into the fourth quarter, and they wound up catching back up and winning the game late. And this is a game where they put up 635 yards of offense, out-yarded UNC. UNC's defense is just still really not good at all. And Georgia Tech had to come back multiple times in this game from down 2 scores. They were down 2 scores early, came back in the second quarter, then they were down 2 scores again and came back again in the fourth quarter and won as 12.5-point dogs. So that's a big win for Georgia Tech there. So I was looking to go against Georgia Tech, potentially coming off such a big game. But they're facing Virginia, and Virginia's coming off multiple big games in a row. So this is why I don't want to have anything to do with with either of these teams here. Even though I would look to go against Georgia Tech, coming off such a huge win, yeah, they're in like an obvious letdown spot. But these are the reasons why I also don't really want anything to do with Virginia here. They're coming off the game I mentioned last week, where 2 weeks ago they beat North Carolina as an even bigger underdog on the road. So I don't know if people will do any like syllogism type of thing there, because both teams beat North Carolina close. So people might consider that to be a bit of a wash as far as like what the recreational bettors might think here. But that's a huge game for Virginia. They won in an upset as like 24-point underdogs. And then second straight game on the road, they went to Miami and played that game into at least one overtime. Might have gone into multiple overtimes and wound up losing that game. Again, as a big underdog, playing Miami, a big-name team, even though Miami has their struggles and makes their mistakes. But Virginia played that game close. Kind of brutal way to lose that game. Played them tight into overtime, wound up losing by 3. So coming off those 2 max effort games, big games, I just don't want any part of Virginia either here, even though, and they have Louisville on deck as well, which is a bigger game than the Georgia Tech game here. So it's almost like a sandwich almost there as well. So I don't want anything to do with either of these teams, really. And looking at the market, Virginia's gone down from 2.5 to 2-point favorite at home. And they have 71% of the tickets, but only 69% of the cash. So the public apparently still likes Virginia more than they like Georgia Tech, I guess, here. And it looks like there is reverse line movement and less of the cash than the tickets, all on Virginia there. So it looks like that means the market is indicating on Georgia Tech there, which is crazy, because I think Georgia Tech, if anything, might be in the somewhat worst of the 2 spots there, because they're in such a monster letdown spot for such a monster win. So that's why I would definitely want to stay away from that. Maybe it would be a game where you want to look to go over, because both teams are in such bad situations. They might not like bring their A game like defensively and play defense that physically in this game. And it looks like it has gone up from 54.5 to 58 here, with 88% of the tickets on, or 88% of the cash, I mean, on the over, but only 83% of the tickets on the over. So I don't know. But that game, yeah, tough to choose a side in that one. But again, I'm just pointing out, like, I notice that a particular team is in like what I think is a pretty bad spot, and then I say, oh, what's their who are they playing this week, and what's that other team's situation this week, and can I actually go against them? And the one other one I'll mention here, I wanted to go against Old Dominion because they played James Madison really close. James Madison, undefeated team, they're up in the rankings now. They are the team in the Sun Belt to beat, leading the Sun Belt right now, the undefeated team, and this was a close game somewhat that ODU played against them. James Madison did get up to a 2-score lead against them in the second half, but Old Dominion came back and they got to within 3 in the fourth. With still, I believe with still 10 minutes left in the game, so ODU played them close. So I was going to look to against Old Dominion because that's such a step-up game. You're playing like the class of the conference. Big game there, but they're playing, and they have Liberty next, so it's actually like a sandwich. So really, I think Old Dominion's in a pretty bad spot here. So it is still like a down spot for them, I would say. But they're playing Coastal Carolina, and Coastal Carolina, even though Coastal Carolina, they have 5 wins, so they're looking to get that 6th win to become bowl eligible. So they might be looking for that. So all of those would point me in the direction of Coastal Carolina. However, Coastal Carolina, well, I don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation. Oh, so this is going to be their second straight game without McCall, their starting quarterback. So I think that is now a negative for Coastal Carolina. So Coastal Carolina, I think they lost their quarterback 2 weeks ago, I guess, in this Arkansas State game. So then last week they absolutely destroyed Marshall 34-6, and I think that was the first game without McCall, their quarterback. So I think in that game they had their backup quarterback playing. So that was like the injured player theory type of game for Coastal Carolina there, where you tend to get a bit of value in the line there. That first game where your star player is out, the team tends to like rally around the team tends to just rally in general to compensate for that star player going down, knowing that, hey, we have to step it up. We're without this guy. We got to play harder. That tends to be what happens in that first game, and they played hard, and they destroyed Marshall. So now they're in that second game with their backup quarterback likely playing here and beating Marshall. Even though Marshall hasn't been good in the Sun Belt this year, they're still like kind of a big name team, one of the bigger names in this conference. So that is still like a big win, I would say, for Coastal Carolina. So the spot, even though I think it's worse for Old Dominion, it's not quite positive enough on Coastal Carolina for me to want to actually play it. And the market looks like it's doing some weird things that are going against Coastal Carolina. It looks like it's reverse line moving against Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina has gone down from a 2-point road favorite to a 1-point road favorite, although that might have something to do with their quarterback injury there, but they're still a road favorite. So the books are telling you they are the better of the two teams between them and Old Dominion. But it looks like 52% of the tickets on Coastal Carolina, but 94% of the cash also on Old Dominion. So it looks like the market is kind of strongly indicating on Old Dominion there. But so all these conflicting things, and like I mentioned, there are some negatives to the situation for Coastal Carolina, but I think the situation is somewhat more of a negative for Old Dominion because they're coming off that big win. And so that keeps me off of that game. So that's how I tend to look at these games. I look at the schedule and say, which teams do I want to go against? Which teams do I think are in these like bad spots here? But then if they're playing against teams that are in bad spots, or I don't like what I'm seeing in the market to such an extent that it might keep me off of it, that is unfortunately what happened in a lot of these games here, because otherwise I would have had like 4 or maybe even 5 plays this week. I only have 3, which I think are the strongest. Once again, Arkansas +6 against Florida, who I think is in a big-time sandwich. Iowa State -2.5 against Kansas, who I think is in a big letdown situation. And Mississippi State +4, which I think is also against a team that is in a sandwich spot. I forget who that's even against. Whoever that's against, they're in a sandwich spot. It's against Kentucky. They're in a sandwich spot as well. That's going to do it. I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter for I mostly do political shit posting. So if you're into that, check me out there. If you're into offensive comedy, check out the Tower Gang podcast. We are the most offensive podcast that is out there. Check that out. as well. You can follow us. We live stream to YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. We're on all those things. We are on Spotify. We post the episodes up there. You can subscribe to our locals to give us some support. TowerGame.locals.com. Funding my gambling habit, obviously. No. All that money goes back into the show to support the show that you love and that makes you laugh. So, and quickly, because I haven't done it for a few weeks, and I should be doing it because I like the guy. I like them over at flapper.net, F-L-A-P-P-R, flapper.net. That's where I got this awesome Milk Sommelier hat. You can go follow them and go check out their merch. They have pretty much all booby-related materials. So if you like the ladies, you like the titties, you can go follow Flapper. But they do a lot of political shit posting, and they do some sports blogging as well. So kind of in the same vein as me. We're all libertarians politically. We all like humor. So we're all kind of in like the comedy sphere to some extent as well, and we're all into sports. So a lot of overlap between me and the guys at Flapper. They're good guys. Go check it out. I'm Tower Game Toad. I'll be back with an NFL video. I'm going to be up so late. Peace, brother.